Hello and welcome to The Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of The Gaggle, Peter Lavelle. So, Peter, yesterday in Brussels, a very, very important meeting took place. It was one of the biggest meetings of the year. Mind you, the year is only 11 days old. But attending this meeting was NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, European Council President Charles Michel, and our friend, the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. And the purpose of this meeting was to issue a joint declaration by NATO and the European Union. Now, this is the third such declaration. There was one in 2016, one in 2018, and now there's another one. And what's striking about this declaration is obviously the total fusion now of NATO and the European Union. NATO, that means the United States, and it's essentially making clear that if you're a member of NATO or the European Union, you have no sovereignty. And that's why it's very, very important to remember that the states that comprise Europe have no sovereignty. They are not, they are just regions. They're like a region of France or a region of Yorkshire. I mean, or a region of UK, like Yorkshire. You basically do as you're told. So just wanted to show you a couple of things from this document, and you can see here. This is it says the Joint Declaration on EU-NATO Cooperation, and it then goes on, this strategic partnership is founded on our shared values, and talking about, about our unequivocal commitment to promote and safeguard peace, freedom, and prosperity. And then today we are faced with the gravest threat to Euro-Atlantic security in decades, Russia's brutal war in Ukraine, and so on. Now, right away, question arises, how is this a threat to Euro-Atlantic security? I mean, it's, there's a war going on in the Donbass. What's that got to do with Euro-Atlantic security? I mean, it's but that this is the overheated rhetoric that comes along, and then
and also you because they focus on Ukraine. Ukraine is not a member of the European Union and is not a member of NATO.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And then, we express our full solidarity with Ukraine, reiterate our unwavering and continued support for its independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity within its internationally recognized borders. And then, so again, what has that got to do with, the Euro-Atlantic security? But again,
hang on, before we go to the next slide, okay? The NATO-EU strategic partnership is founded on our shared values. Well, NATO is a military alliance. It has nothing to do with values.
Right.
The EU is a wannabe political project that wants to get there through economic integration.
Right.
That's not a value. That is a strategy. Okay.
Right. No,
the entire premise is I mean, I can't even get past the first.
No, you can't. No, that's yeah. No, you really cannot, and that's why it's very important. They talk about these shared values, and of course, whenever they say this, because values is a kind of a feel-good word, you assume, oh well, this is really good things, really, like mom and apple pie. Oh, values. We have values. They don't have values. Right. So we're committed. Oh, we just, we just care so much about humanity. But of course, we know these values. What were you doing with these values when you bombed Yugoslavia? Where were these values when you bombed Libya? What were these values when a number of you involved in the invasion of Iraq? I mean, what were these values?
What are the values of the EU recognizing a coup government with Nazi elements on the Maidan? What does that have to do with your values?
That's right. That's a very
and
good
because
point.
of the example I gave and the examples George just gave. So why don't we just take the values thing out of the equation? Because apparently you don't have them.
That's right. That's right.
And if you want people to share those values, I won't share them with you.
That's right. And then it says, authoritarian actors challenge our interests, values, and democratic principles using multiple means, political, economic, technological, and military. Well, how is anyone challenging anything that the Europeans are doing? I mean, what are these authoritarian actors, doing to challenge anything? But again, it's presenting they're presenting themselves as these, we're defensive, we're just minding our own business, doing whatever we're doing. And there are these people challenging us.
Yeah, they want us to believe. They want us to believe, point number 4 here, that there are people in the Kremlin and people in Beijing up at night in a sweat, pacing the floor. We have to destroy their democracy. Folks, it doesn't happen that way. Okay. From the Kremlin all to Beijing, all they're doing is watching the West collapse itself because of its so-called values. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's right. We live in an area of growing strategic competitions. China's growing assertiveness and policies present challenges that we need to address. Persistent conflict, fragility, and instability in our European neighborhood undermine our security and provide fertile ground for strategic competitors as well as terrorist groups to gain influence, destabilize society, and pose a threat to our security. Now, these things that in your neighborhood, now, let's remember that, the terrorist threat you created by in bombing of Libya. You had a perfectly responsible government of Muammar Gaddafi who kept things under control. You decide to overthrow him. This, of course, led to a flow of terrorists and refugees and whatnot into Europe. And then you did the same thing in Syria immediately afterwards, which again led to a flow of terrorists and so on. And then the war in Ukraine, where we know you undermine the democratically elected government. You trigger. So this thing, all these things are going on in our neighborhood, and we don't know anything about we've got this little garden, you're like, as Borrell said, we're planting our little roses, and then these horrible people there, want to take our roses away. No, you created this. Your actions that created this instability.
And on China's growing assertiveness and policies present challenges we need to address. I thought this was a document for the EU and NATO. I mean, why are they talking about China? I mean, is that in the neighborhood?
Well, that's another thing. That's just they've added to their mission, mission statement, or China, the Indo-Pacific. We have our interest in the Indo-Pacific.
But this gives rise to what George and I have talked about many times. If you fuse together the EU and NATO, what you're doing is all defense and military thinking is done out of Washington. They've walked away from, so they've outsourced their security to Washington.
That's right.
Okay?
I think
Washington is trying to deindustrialize them.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
So,
yeah. No, that's right. So when you have a meeting, Stoltenberg, Michel, and von der Leyen, you also know, well, the boss is doing other things because it's the United States that runs the show. I mean, that's it. So, you all you're doing is basically doing the bidding of the United States. You're not in any way helping the people supposedly in your jurisdiction.
Yeah, and when the coming trade war that Europe is going to face against the United States, it's inevitable. I mean, the entire premise of the EU, I've said many times here, is security and prosperity, and they're not delivering either right now. Okay, and the engine of the European Union, at least economically and financially, is Germany. Once Germany starts slowing down, everything else starts slowing down too. So your values aren't going to get you too far in a cold room when you're wearing a diaper and it's cold, okay? And no lights.
NATO remains the foundation of our collective defense for its allies. I always love it when they have the allies is always uppercase, yeah, and essential.
And it's unclear who the allies are.
That's right. For Euro-Atlantic security, we recognize the value of a stronger, more capable European, blah, blah. And then our mutually reinforcing strategic partnership contributes to strengthening security in Europe and beyond. NATO and the EU play complementary, coherent, and mutually reinforcing roles. But then you have to say, I mean, how is it, you know, in what way is your security strengthened? I mean, let's say you go back 10 years, you were in a lot better place than you are now because, you know, you've got a war right in your neighborhood, which you didn't need to have. It could have been avoided for years and years and years. It could have been avoided. So the whole idea that we're strengthening our security, no, you're weakening security. And that's why, I mean, and they kind of admit this. I mean, you know, all the time Stoltenberg goes before the cameras, you know, we are in danger because, you know, Russia is doing this and Russia is doing that, and we are really in danger. Yeah, but you kind of created this. You know, you were in a nice place 10 years ago. Now you're in a very bad place.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, when they keep talking about our solid unity and solidarity, well, then why are they inking this document? It seems to me they're in panic mode. Okay, they're definitely in panic mode because their security and economic and financial situation is deteriorating before our eyes, and very rapidly, I would say, also.
Yeah.
And so, you know, my overall assessment here is that you keep doing this, but you're not getting positive results. So why do you keep doing it? Isn't it time to say, this is not working, okay? But if you outsource all of your security and defense to Washington, there's no conversation, there's no debate.
No, that's right. And then as the security threats and challenges we are confronted with are evolving. So this is why these things are always so difficult to grasp. 1 minute, our security is become very strong. We are really strong. And then we've got this dire threats and challenges. You know, you got to make up your mind. Which is it? Is everything hunky-dory, or are you facing, you know, peril? We will take our partnership to the next level on the basis of our long-standing cooperation.
Whatever that means.
Whatever that means. We will further strengthen our cooperation in existing areas and expand and deepen our cooperation to address the particular growing geostrategic competition, and so on.
But George, it's interesting here. So, an EU skeptic told me many, many years ago the following, and I think he's absolutely right. To create the European superstate under the auspices of the United States, you need crisis. Right. The only way they're going to build their superstate is through crisis, because no one ever will vote for it.
I think that's right. I mean, I think that, I mean, you know, if one goes back in history, and I think that, you know, I think the European Union was always envisaged as a kind of a political adjunct to NATO. Remember, NATO came first. NATO always comes first. NATO created in 1949. The Treaty of Rome wasn't signed until 1957. So it was always you start off with the European community, coal and steel community, and so on, of economic cooperation. But I think it was always envisaged as the kind of the political adjunct to NATO. NATO was at the heart of the West. And the evidence of that was, you know, when they pushed West Germany became a member of NATO, and then it was done explicit that this was going to be, you kind of create essentially a military entity at its core, and then you have, you know, a kind of political superstructure, but it was always there as a way for the Americans to control Europe. I mean, I think, you know, there were times when the Americans were frustrated, but that was always there, that this will be an easy way for America to control Europe.
And it's very interesting you mentioned the induction of West Germany into NATO, because before that, it was always called the German question. What do you do with, because they were occupied East and West, the British and the Americans, let the French have a little bit, but you had this occupation here, and it was what to do with Germany. The US decided, no, we will not resolve that. We're just going to pull half of it into NATO, which sent a very powerful signal, one of the most powerful signals during the Cold War, to the Soviet Union. Because what George is saying is right. No, yeah, maybe they're doing economic integration, but what they're doing is military integration, and it's against us.
Exactly. And you know, I've mentioned this many times before, but that was the trigger for the establishment of the Warsaw Pact. The moment West Germany was inducted into NATO, they thought, hey, this is serious, and this is a potential threat to us. And that's always so. It was obviously a provocative step, but the European Union or European Economic Community was really, you know, part and parcel of this. And so in signing this declaration, we will take the NATO-EU partnership forward in close consultation and cooperation with all NATO allies and EU member states in the spirit of full mutual openness and blah, blah, blah. In this context, we view transparency as crucial. What transparency? Okay. We encourage the fullest possible involvement of the NATO allies that are not members of the EU in its initiatives. We encourage the fullest possible involvement of the EU members that are not part of the alliance in its initiatives. So, you know, let's think about the case. Let's imagine Austria. Now, you know, the Soviet Union was very generous in the case of Austria. They withdrew their forces. The only thing that they asked is that Austria be neutral. And now, when you say things like this, you want the EU to say Austria is a member of the EU. But if you do this, then again, you know, you're essentially getting Austria in by the back door. Same goes, incidentally, for Finland. I mean, Finland, by doing what it's doing, it's kind of violated the agreements it signed with the Soviet Union after World War II. But in the case of Finland, it's a kind of more explicit. By now, suddenly, you know, it's going to be inducted into NATO. So, you step by step, you're violating all of these agreements. Hey, we're just defensive. You know, don't look at us. You know, we don't want no trouble. So,
yeah. A NATO-EU partnership forward in close consultation and cooperation with all NATO allies and EU members in the spirit of full mutual openness and no, it's the reverse. This is a consolidation of power. There is no debate. Decisions will be made at the top and marching orders will be sent out. Do you think Orbán's going to last very long in this? No.
Exactly. Now, what I wanted just to show you here, you know, if you look at the Treaty of the European Union, the latest iteration, you know, it's already kind of implicit where the EU is going, because here, you know, you do this boilerplate. The Union's aim is to promote peace, its values, and the well-being of its people. Now, of course, you know, if you sign an agreement with NATO, then you're obviously not promoting peace. I mean, that's, you know, it's a military alliance. You're not doing it. And then it says, in its relations with the wider world, the Union shall uphold and promote its values and interests and contribute to the protection of its citizens. It shall contribute to peace, security, sustainable development of the earth, mutual respect among peoples, free and fair trade, blah, blah. What is it done to promote peace? I mean, I don't see it.
What does this paragraph have to do with geopolitics and national interest? Nothing.
Nothing at all. And then here, this is where it gets kind of interesting, because there's the common security and defense policy. The common security and defense policy, this is the EU, shall be an integral part of our common foreign and security policy. It shall provide the Union with an operational capacity drawing on civilian and military assets. The Union may use them on missions outside the Union for peacekeeping, conflict prevention, strengthening international security in accordance with the principles of the UN Charter.
Like bombing Serbia. Like bombing Serbia.
Exactly. So you can already see that it's there, it's implicit in the Treaty of the European Union that they intended to use it as an adjunct of NATO. And
No, I really go back.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we could actually help them a little bit here. The Union may use them on missions outside of the Union for peacekeeping, conflict prevention, and strengthening of international security in accordance with the principles of the United Nations Charter. There should be a footnote. 1, see NATO.
That's right. And it says this common and security and defense policy shall include the progressive framing of a common union defense policy. This will lead to a common defense within the European Council, acting unanimously, so decides. It shall, in that case, recommend to member states the adoption of such a decision in accordance with their respective constitutional requirements. Well, where is there anything here about sovereignty? I mean, that's the point. So all these states who sign on to these NATO and the EU, they do sign away their sovereignty. I mean, you are not sovereign. You are just regions. I mean, they just
Okay.
you don't get to decide anything of any importance.
Okay, I'll do it again. It shall, in that case, recommend to the member states the adoption of such a decision in accordance with their respective constitutional requirements. Footnote number 2, see NATO.
So the policy of the Union in accordance with this section shall not prejudice the specific character of the security and defense of member states and shall respect the obligation of certain member states, blah, blah, and to NATO.
So you can't disagree. No EU member can disagree with NATO policy, even if you're not in NATO. That's exactly what that says.
That's what it says. Exactly. That's exactly it. So, your attempt to say, well, we're just in the EU. We're not a member of NATO. No, you are a member of NATO. By being a member of the EU, you are de facto a member of NATO. And member states shall make civilian and military capabilities available to the Union for the implementation of the common security and defense policy to contribute to the objectives defined by the Council, and so on.
So, but can member states debate what are the common security and defense policies? Can any member debate that in the context of this document? No,
of course. And we found this out with this during the whole Ukraine crisis, where everybody had to be on board for sanctions. Everybody's on board. None of this was ever debated. The public was not consulted, and Orban spoke out against it, but it didn't really matter. He still had to go along with it. I mean, it's like basically because you're part of NATO, you're in the EU, you have to go along with it. You're not sovereign. I mean, you can carve out little things for yourself, but only as long as NATO and EU tolerate it. I mean, they can always put the squeeze on Orban. I mean, anytime they want, but they kind of tolerate it. Okay, Hungary is a small state, and so on. But if they want, they can choke Hungary off. So you can see that this document, is a very interesting example of just how little Europe really matters. The European states matter. They just have to do as they're told. Values, democracy, freedom, but you don't have any democracy. You don't have any freedom. Decisions are made for you by others. They make these decisions.
But see, one of the issues that we had, and George and I focused on this a lot prior to the conflict in Ukraine, or this part of the conflict in Ukraine, was the examples of Poland and Hungary. And basically, the judicial system, the Warsaw has a gripe to pick with Brussels and vice versa. Also, social policy in Hungary, where the Hungarians differ from the edicts and diktats of Brussels. But now we're going to the next level, George. Now, dairy products and geraniums will be governed by NATO outside of Washington. Okay, so we went to the next level. Okay, you thought Brussels was bad. Buckle up and be prepared for impact.
Right. Yeah, no, that's right. But it's a kind of if you think of the analogy, we always have to think about the era of the Soviet era. Now, the Soviet era in Eastern Europe, you didn't have an independent foreign and defense policy. I mean, that was laid down by the Soviet Union, Warsaw Pact. You had to follow that foreign policy. Now, within the Warsaw Pact countries, they allowed a certain amount of latitude. Kada, he was allowed to have his goulash communism. There was a certain liberalization for a while in a number of countries, like Czechoslovakia enjoyed a certain amount of liberalization before '68. But that's the way it works now in the EU and NATO. You have a certain amount of latitude domestically, but even that can be ended. I mean, it's like the Soviet Union would suddenly get fed up and say, well, we're tired of this latitude. No more goulash communism. It's time to bring things under socialist control. So in the same way, they say with Hungary, okay, you can do your thing with the judges, and then they say, no, you can't do your thing with the judges. You can't do your thing with education about gay and lesbian issues. So, but foreign and security policy, no, that's out. That's decided undemocratically by a handful of people.
Yeah, but see, what we've seen, the European Union under the watchful eye of NATO, is that anything can be justified for defense. Yeah. Anything can be justified for security. Right. Okay. I like your analogy, because that's what the Kremlin did during the Cold War to all of the Eastern Bloc countries. Right. Well, we understand, your issues on this and cultural things, but security.
Yeah, that's right.
Trumps everything.
That's right.
And this is what we're seeing here.
Yeah,
if it's going to be a medical emergency, which they tried with COVID, and now it's Russia, China, okay, and then everything can be taken off the board. Your civil rights, democratic procedures, your own sovereignty, your own nope.
That's right. And it's very interesting because when you look at these votes at the United Nations, or the United Nations General Assembly, the EU NATO blocs votes unanimously. There's no deviation whatsoever. Anything. They all vote. Oh man, you think they can't all be in agreement? I mean, you can't just put 30 people together and expect all 30 people to be in agreement. No, all 30 are in absolute agreement, whatever the issue, whether it's something on the Middle East, or whether
Venezuela.
Yeah, whatever it is, boom, they always vote. You'd have to say that actually in the Soviet era, there was more dissent. You'd have Romania would vote, differently from the Soviet Union. And so, obviously then there was China. China used to, in the Soviet Union would vote for it. But here, boom, every time, all 30 vote in one way. So you're thinking 30, they're all in agreement, not one dissent.
George, you live in Europe, but I've spent the majority of my entire life living in Europe and in Russia. And, in my travels through Europe, quite extensive, mostly in Eastern Europe, actually, I would never say they're all the same. No, but their institutions treat them as if they're all the same.
That's right. So when they decided, okay, let's vote against Russia membership of the UN Human Rights Council, you think, wouldn't there be one country in Europe would say, I still think, Russia should have a membership, and, boom, no, all voted. Or or the one about the glorification of fascism. You think, wouldn't there be one country in Europe would say, I really don't think it's a great idea, to have glorification of fascism. No,
particularly in Europe.
Yeah. That's right. It's amazing. And it's very funny. It'd be good to put all of them into one room, and then they all put their hand up like that. He said, "That's a nice picture." Remember, we used to have these fun pictures like Brezhnev and the meetings at the the Central Committee of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. They would all put their hand up, and it was so funny. Look at this unanimity. Let's put all of these people together and see how they all vote.
It's interesting how they fall in lockstep when it comes to NATO's prerogatives and and demands when it comes to security. But I bet you if they had a vote on what is the best recipe for borscht, they would be deadlock. Deadlock. I mean, Kevin McCarthy's election process would look like a walk in the park.
That's right.
Because borscht is more important.
That's right, exactly. No, there would be at loggerheads, or about which wines are better, the Alsatian wines or French wines. Boom. I mean, they would all be in disagreement. But on the most fundamental issues, we're all on board.
Yeah, but it's like the omnibus bill that was shamelessly passed by the last Congress. Nobody read it. Right. Nobody was allowed to essentially read it because there wasn't any time. And that's the fate of Europe, okay? NATO will take care of your problems. Look at their track record. That's it. Good luck with that.
That's it. That's right. And that's why we talk about all these European leaders. They're completely interchangeable. And of course they're interchangeable because they don't matter. It doesn't matter who's the prime minister of Finland. I mean, if you were to tell me, oh, by the way, the Finn chick, she's not prime minister anymore. I mean, so okay.
Well, George, she's going to be running some kind of EU commission, so don't worry. She'll be partying on somewhere else.
Exactly, that's right. Exactly, she'll be partying. It doesn't matter. You bring somebody in, install them here. You can party away because you don't actually make any decisions. I mean, those decisions are being taken out of your hands.
Isn't it akin? I mean, I don't want to stretch the historical analogy too far, but it reminds me of the initial phase after the Second World War in Eastern Europe, because they had the Moscow Poles and the Czech Pole, the Moscow Czechs, and then you had the Romanian Czechs and the Bulgarian communists. They sent them in. They were trained up. They preferred to speak Russian than even their own national language. It's very, I don't want to push it too far, but it's very similar, okay?
Exactly.
Because all of these elites were trained and indoctrinated to have the same world view, no deviation at all. It doesn't matter if it's Bulgaria or Poland; they're all the same.
Exactly. That's why none of these elections or changes in government or anything, none of them matters. We get very worked out. Oh well, there's been a change in government in Bulgaria. The pro-Russian party is now part of the coalition. It's not going to make any difference. It's not really pro-Russian, and if it were pro-Russian, it's not going to have any influence on the government. And the same, we have this with Maloney. This important change in government in Italy. Now there's a kind of pro-Russian faction will be in power. No change whatsoever.
Well, just like in Sweden, there was was it like New Democrats, something like something name?
That's it. Yeah.
And they won the majority of the vote. So all the other minority parties that collectively would have a plurality, we're not going to work with them. The people, the most popular party, and no, we're not going to work with them. We'll be obstructionists, okay? Right. And because they won't follow the script like we do, okay? Which is we all fail upward, okay?
Yeah. That's right. So that's and that's it. So you got essentially you got one block, the sort of Europe, all speaking in one voice, and they're not doing a great deal to advance the peace or prosperity of the European people. So they, which is really all that you would expect from a governing elite. Are we better off than we were before this bunch of power?
Yeah, but don't you see this strategy ensures the entrenchment of the current elites, and they can reproduce themselves, their children, their proteges, to maintain the momentum and not the opposite of momentum, the stagnation of because they have all the tools of power, okay? And most importantly, they have the tool of propaganda, okay? No dissent, okay?
Absolutely.
All right, this document that George brought up made me at face value seemed a bit obscure, but no, it's very, very important. Where slowly but surely the powers that be are abrogating all the responsibilities they have to the people that they apparently are supposed to be representing. No, you sign a document like this, and then Washington says, "Done, we're done."
That's it. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So much for any idea that the EU is going to rebel, or so they're going to get fed up with Washington. They'll be Macron will do this, Schultz will do that, Orban will do the other. No, the orders have come down. NATO and the EU are one and the same, and the boss who runs the whole show is in Washington. It's not even on the European continent, but that he runs the show.
And essentially, the same person holds Europeans in contempt.
Exactly.
For signing the document.
Openly. They don't even bother to hide their contempt. And why should they? I mean,
yeah, for those that are saying that America is becoming like Europe, I just say, open your eyes, read that document. It's the reverse.
Exactly.
Yeah. Good chat, and these are kind of discussions we need to have, because no one in the mainstream media ever talks about these things at all. And which makes it important doing. These people sign their name to it. They're making a public proclamation, and they know it'll never be discussed. Okay, they win all of the time. They structurally design it always to win. Okay, everybody signed on, didn't you hear? Okay.
That's right. And the amusing part of it is that in the media, or the commentary that you get on antiwar.com or Responsible Statecraft or on Fox News, is that it's the Europeans. The Europeans are sort of, are running the show, and they are the ones who are dragging America into something. Oh, they're not prepared to do anything about their defense, and they're just dragging America, pulling it in. We got to stay out of it. Europeans have sorted out their own problems. No, it is all run by the Americans, from start to finish.
And if you want any evidence of that, is that the blowing up of the Nord Stream pipelines, it made sure that Germany didn't think twice for a nanosecond.
Exactly.
To rebel.
That's right. Yeah.
That's why it was blown up, George.
Exactly. And again, we're talking about contempt. Biden said it right in front of Sergeant Schultz. He said, "We will end it." And so, but what about Germany? Don't the pipelines belong to Germany? We will end it, Biden said. So that's it. And they did it. They ended it. So he showed his utter contempt for Sergeant Schultz. I mean, that's it. We will decide. I don't care who this pipeline belongs to. We will decide it.
Don't get into the niceties of all of it, and the minutia and the weeds. All right, it was a good discussion, and it's something George is very good. It was on his radar, and I'm glad he shared it with us. All right, everybody, this is The Gaggle with Peter and George. We're on Locals, so please go to thegaggle.locals.com. Visit our store, and this time tomorrow, George will be doing his live stream.
3 p.m. Eastern Time. Please join me. Come with comments, criticisms, and suggestions, and remember Little Buddy, because Little Buddy, he's wondering about, he's one of the allies. He wants an uppercase ally. And when he finds that he's somehow being treated like as if he were Sergeant Schultz. So think about his tip jar. See if you have a few bob in your pocket. Whip him out, dunk him in there. That'll keep him happy, and stop the complaining. We're very grateful for all of your help and friendship and support. The more you're able to contribute, the more of these videos we can make, the more we can invest in the new technology, and the more likely it is that Buddy will accept his diminished status, though I wouldn't bet on it. But remember, if you like The Gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye.